Hey everyone, welcome back to the Soul Star podcast with Mandy and Allison from Soul Star Energy Collective. We are intuitives, healers, and mentors just here to, chat about intuition and energy and development and healing and just have a good time with it. So welcome. Thank you for being
Yeah.
here.
Have some good cackles, right? Just like,
We do like to cackle.
I know.
So this week we're going to talk about triggers,
Oh, wah, wah.
but we make it fun.
We do make it fun. That's why we try to make everything fun. And,
Mhm.
it's something that well, oh my God, I feel like the last 5 years, 4 or 5 years, it's just been Triggerville.
Mhm.
It's just been ample opportunity to be triggered with everything in the world.
Mhm.
But particularly this year, with just kind of, I think, with the astrology, and we've really kind of started the year with a bang.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is.
yeah, yeah.
It's a hot one.
No, literally. And so we're like, you know what? Like, let's talk about
Let's
triggers,
just do it.
what they are,
Hmm.
what we get, like what they mean, and how we can kind of work with them, not just be like, oh, I was fucking
Yeah.
triggered and that's it.
Well, and people say that over time or all the time. I feel like trigger is kind of like uh, a fun word, like manifestation. Like people just talk about triggers and without actually really understanding the opportunity that triggers bring, right?
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
feel like there's certain aspects of triggers, like there's certain different layers to being triggered that you can learn from it. And so when we say opportunity, like why would a trigger have an opportunity? It's an opportunity to reflect and to understand why that is triggering, why that's pissing you off, why that's bothering you. And I think
Yeah.
when you first start your spiritual awakening and you start to really work on yourself and you're really paying attention to how you're reacting to the world around you, which is like one of the first things that you start to do when you want to understand your own energy,
Mm-hmm.
is starting to understand how you're reacting to the world around you. And I feel like everybody is triggering you or certain aspects. And I remember this very clearly, like my kids, big triggers for me, but also big, big,
They're big triggers. They're just walking triggers.
they're fucking triggers, right? But it's like if you have kids, like part of their purpose here is to teach you. So if you're taking that from that perspective, they're triggering you to teach you how you're reacting to them and how you can maybe shift your perspective or look at the healing within you. So one of the main things, like my son used to trigger me all the time, not to say he doesn't anymore, but for different reasons. But when I was really starting out on my journey and I was starting to understand my own energy and how I was reacting to the world and the things that I needed to work on, he was triggering me just with things that he would say or things that he would do. And then I would get phone calls from other parents or from the school or whatever it was. And he was misbehaving, right? So he was stepping outside of the box that I placed him in
Yeah.
on expectations on how you to behave, how you show up at school, how you show up for your sport, like your coach, like all these things, like, and don't ever step out over the line. Don't you dare.
Because you'll embarrass me.
Right. So I wasn't letting him explore or become who he needed to become. And I was so focused on him because he was a reflection of me. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
anytime he stepped over that line or into the gray area, I would be told about it or I found out about it. It triggered the shit out of me. And it was
Yeah.
because it was a reflection of my insecurities on how I was being perceived from the other adults in our community or in our little sphere of people or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And that was a huge epiphany for me. So as soon as I realized that, as soon as I let that, like worked to let that go, it was not immediate. And I let him become who he was meant to be. And he's turned into the most amazing human being ever
Mm-hmm.
because I really
And maybe
learned.
if you
Yeah,
had not recognized that and continued to, butt heads and push back and forth, like that could have changed the trajectory of, how he showed up in the world. Because,
absolutely.
right, like if you're constantly getting pushback of like, no, you can't be you.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, well, I'm going to be me times 100.
Yeah.
Like that could have gone a totally different way.
And I'm sure it would have because he was headed down a path that I was not very comfortable with. And he talks about it now where it's like, me before I started doing this work and me after, me now, because before I was very controlling and I was angry all the time and I was short tempered. I was, I was strung, like I was tightly strung, like I was wound up all the time.
Strung out.
Right. But that's part of what pushed me onto this journey, is because I felt burnout all the time. And I, that came out, but on in my family. But me doing that work helped me, he healed too. So like, and my daughter and my husband. So it was all very in the household, everything kind of elevated, ascended, and it's a very beautiful like energy in our home now, whereas before it was tough. But so if you have children and they're triggering you, start reflecting. Sit with that, start reflecting and seeing why. But it's probably most likely triggering insecurities about yourself, things that you went through as a child. Like even with my daughter, and she would trigger me, and still does sometimes. I catch it, just being so nonchalant about how her friends perceive her. Like she doesn't give a shit about,
which is like an amazing quality.
Right? Why would that trigger me?
I know.
Why does that trigger? But it triggers me because I cared so much about how people perceived me when I was young. Like I was scared shitless of being in a confrontation or the mean girls being mean to me. So I learned how to be a chameleon and how to just kind of like be there but not be loud. Right. Like I was there, but I wasn't too there.
So there wasn't an opportunity to be ridiculed.
Yeah.
And now, but in saying that, Mandy, right now, I don't feel like you care as much what people know. So that's a very interesting trigger, because it's triggering not Mandy now.
No,
it's triggering an inner child.
Yeah.
This part of you. So that's why when we talk about inner child work, because like I know sometimes like talking about inner child, you're like, what? Like what? The 5-year-old me? Like, come on, that's ridiculous. That's forever ago. But that's a clear example that your inner child, your teenage version was triggered, and that came out, even though right now in this stage it doesn't bother you.
No, and that's why it's important to do the energy work, because I am healing that inner child, and the more I heal her and work on those specific things, it makes me stronger in this moment.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
So being able to release those stories and the way that I felt back then is making me not care as much in my current reality. And that's taken time, because through the work that I do with the bank and stuff, like there's definitely been times in the last 10 years where I was very much like my teenage self, where I was like, ooh, don't be too loud. Don't make this, just let it go. Let's just let it go. But now, because of the work that I've been doing, I less and less.
Yeah.
And it's empowering, because now I'm stepping more into my power and feeling more confident, like all that sort of stuff. But it's interesting because, my daughter didn't like necessarily do something. It was like what she wasn't doing that triggered me.
Yeah. Well, and also, you were like, it was bringing through your own childhood experiences and fears of like, oh my God, if you don't give a shit, people are going to do this and this and this. And then you worry about the downfall of that your daughter will have to, endure.
And that's not her experience at all. She's like, first of all, she doesn't give a shit. Like maybe she gives a little bit of a shit, but not enough to care, like not enough to make any changes to whatever. But also like, that's not her reality in the sense of, her friend group or the group of kids that she's going to school with or whatever it is. Right. She's not worried about it. And I don't know why I need to be worried about it.
I know. Well, it's so funny because as you're saying that, I'm like, I realize with Carter, 14 years old now, going through his broody teenage years. And there's a bit of that for me, because there's a bit of where I get like, I don't care. I'll say something and he'll be like, okay, I don't care.
And then you should care.
I know. And I think for me, the trigger is like, where's the fucking empathy, buddy? Right? Like, if you don't have empathy, what the fuck is wrong with you? Right? Like, I think that's where my trigger comes in, because then I'm like, oh God, is he a serial killer? Like, what's happening? But that's my people pleasing. That my whole life have battled with that and still do. So how much of me feeling that way is from my people pleasing and being like, oh my God, and how much is it like, hey, I'm raising a good human. Mm-hmm. You should have some empathy. Let's talk about this. Right. Like, and that's the thing. He does, he's got a beautiful soul and stuff, but it's just some things where I'm kind of sitting there going, and I'm like, or you feel so much, but you're blocking it out. And that's a problem too.
Because we're going to have to heal this later.
Yeah. So let's talk about it. God, it'd be so annoying to have me as your mom.
Yeah, it would be.
I know. It'd be so annoying. I found at the beginning of this journey, you and I, when we started, building this business together, and you triggered me. And and what it was the reflection back to me was my insecurities within myself. Mm-hmm. And so, it would be like this, like the perception. So it'd be, we were given many different opportunities, for this trigger to kind of arise, where the perception was that you were, I don't know, because you and I were equals in this business, but this perception that you were
the leader.
And it was something, so all these triggers would kind of happen, and I would feel like that in my solar plexus, where else, and I'd be like, oh God, like, yeah, she's better than me. And I put people up on pedestals all the time. And so there was this huge, like, understanding that it was like, okay, wait, it's not her, or like, and it's a balance mm-hmm. of like, okay, talking about it, being like, okay, this really triggered me. And it doesn't mean that the other person is just like, well, that's your fucking problem, so beat it. No. Fucking deal with it, bitch. No, not that, because like, this is where like having the healthy communication, but it's also me recognizing what part of it was highlighted and what I needed to work on. Mm-hmm. So, you and I kind of really went through that period of like figuring this out and talking about it. So in the sense of like, okay, this is a trigger of mine. I'm going to own that this is due to my insecurities. That's not going to change overnight. Mm-hmm. I recognize it. I'm working on it. This is how you can help support me without, mm-hmm. You having to fold and dim your light, but like, there's a balance, right? Yeah. And so I think like with that, when you can have that recognition, mm-hmm. and then have the ability to talk about it with, mm-hmm. Whoever, then that's where it's like this like happy medium. And we really kind of, worked through that, and like from the very beginning to now, like huge fucking difference in the sense of my own self-worth, or feeling, confident within myself and my ability, and all of the things. But there was many opportunities throughout that, different people that would come into our orbit that would, really highlight it and trigger it, like, and literally be like, when you like have like a meeting, you have a husband and wife, and then like there's some people that be like, you're literally just talking to my husband. Yeah. Not know I do the banking. But this kind of like
it was disrespectful. Like it felt yeah.
But we would have those, we were mm-hmm. presented with some of those opportunities where, and it was clearly disrespectful, but it was also the universe's way of being like, okay, like, mm-hmm. here you go. And in those moments, I realized on reflection was, okay, but if the energy putting out there, so my energy internally, mm-hmm. I'm like feeling small, and mm-hmm. I'm not sure. And I'm bringing my energy down because I'm not really sure, because I'm not confident in myself. But then you are feeling confident in your energy. So on an energetic level, those people are just receiving what they're receiving. And what they were receiving was, no, you did know what you're doing and all of these things. And I was the one pulling it mm-hmm. back. So why would they react any different?
Mm-hmm. Which brings us to the point where it's like, when you're being triggered, or when you're reflecting on something, it has nothing to do with the person that triggered you. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. They're just there to reflect, or to highlight an opportunity to reflect and to do some healing, or, look at something that's
Yeah.
rooted within you. But like there is, when I was triggering you for embodying confidence, and like you said, our energies were being received that way by others.
Yeah.
So you weren't necessarily mad at me
Mm-mm.
for triggering you or for making
Mm-mm.
me, I wasn't making you feel insecure
Mm-mm.
or whatever. You were able to recognize that I was highlighting an insecurity within you that you needed to work on. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where
Yeah.
that's where the conversation is important, especially between us. And I
Yeah.
think that why we have been able to manage our business relationship and our friendship and all that sort of
Mm-hmm.
stuff this far is because we have been very open
And
with
we're aware of
and we're very
we're
aware.
aware of that.
Yeah.
So if we weren't aware of this side and the energy side and all of that, so let's just like we stripped all of that part away and we were just seeing what we're seeing and feeling what we're feeling and having no idea like that our business would have dissolved very
Absolutely.
quickly.
Yes.
And and so you see how in friendships, in relationships, in coworkers, and all of these things,
Mm-hmm.
being able to understand like what's kind of like below that surface of like triggers and how they affect you and how being
Mm-hmm.
able to have that self-awareness is like so important. Like it's just going
Mm-hmm.
to make your life so much easier, right?
Yes, absolutely. And
Yeah.
you can think about this in the workplace because we all have that colleague that really just annoys the shit out of us. And we're like, why does that person
annoys the shit out of me?
God, I have to be in a meeting with this person. Like they don't ever stop talking.
And then you sit in there and you just stare at them and you're like, you're so annoying. Like, look at you talking right now. Are you again?
Why are you asking these questions? Let's just get this over with. But either way, like these people are placed in our orbit so that we can do some reflection because you have to acknowledge that they're triggering you. So
Yeah.
Even understanding the chakras, like Ali and I were talking before we started recording, and I was like, God, this triggers me. It hits me.
We're sitting there, we're like, this triggers me too. This triggers me.
But we were working out like, why does it trigger me? But it hits me in the solar plexus. So that I know the solar plexus is connected to my self-worth, to confidence, to like my identity, like it's all that sort of stuff. So I know like that's at least a clue as to like where I need to start doing the work. If it was making me feel anxious in my chest, that would be related to the heart chakra. If it was making my throat tight, that would be related to my ability to communicate or speak clearly or speak my truth. Like those are little hints as to like where to start, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And to yeah, I don't even know where I was going with that.
Are you texting?
No, I'm not. I'm not doing that.
We were talking about
I'm so good at multitasking sometimes.
Well, failed this time.
You failed. You have failed.
We were talking about how like different relationships can really highlight some opportunities to do some work. So the colleague at work, like we all have that colleague. So, think about
it's hard though when you have somebody that like, let's just say there's somebody that really triggers you, like their personality.
Yeah, let's talk about this.
Like that's really tough,
right?
Like, because what's really tough about that is to take that mirror and turn it back and be like, what?
What's my problem?
What's my problem? And I think like I've really struggled with that in the sense of like, like I've had people in my life that are very narcissistic and triggers the fuck out of me. And then I'm like, I'm not a narcissist. Like if that theory is that everybody's reflecting back to you, right? Then I'm like that part really, I have a hard time mentally getting that.
Yeah, I want to say something about the mirror part because you and I don't necessarily believe it's a mirror like aces to aces.
No,
I feel like the mirror is really, you could replace that word mirror with reflect.
Reflect, so it's not
highlight.
Like, oh, this person's a narcissist and like,
so what part of me
and I'm like, I'm a narcissist.
No. So I think that if you're hearing people talk about triggers and it's like the mirror effect, like what that means is just the reflection. Like what is their why are they triggering you, and
Why is there
why is it
narcissistic
bothering you?
behaviors?
Yeah, why is that bothering you?
Yeah. So it doesn't
And
mean you're a narcissist. It's
no.
just like, what part of you is it highlighting
Yeah, and
that
it
is making you go, ugh.
and it could have something nothing to do with like the obvious either,
Yeah.
right? So it
Yeah.
could be something completely different. Like Aubrey, for example, like it triggered my inner child from high school or from middle school. Her just being not giving a shit about what people thought about her.
Yeah. And you could easily, like, somebody could say, like, if that was a mirror back, you could be like, well, what is it? You're jealous of that or whatever. Like, that's what somebody could kind of say, like, because if you're like, well, I give a shit what people think about me, but not always. It's so, it's not just black and white like that.
Yeah.
So
It takes a lot of digging. Like there's a lot of reflection that goes into it, especially some of them, like that narcissists that you talk about. Like there's some big personalities that really trigger you, and you're like, I just don't understand why. Like, why does that trigger me? Why does that bother me? And sometimes it'll take a while for it to be like to dawn on you,
revealed,
to be
or
revealed.
You don't even want to face it.
Or that,
right? You don't want to, because there's definitely been triggers where I've sat there and I'm like, I don't want to admit that about myself, right? Where you kind of like, ooh, you're like, no, I'm not like that.
I think that's the hardest part of healing, is getting to the point where you can receive the parts of yourself that you don't like,
and
or
call
to
yourself
acknowledge
out.
Yeah, to acknowledge the parts that you may not like about yourself. So, and we all have them. Like, we're not perfect human beings, and nor should we strive to be perfect human beings. Like there's aspects of us, we're gonna be jealous, we're gonna be envious, we're gonna be angry, we're gonna feel guilty, we're gonna do the wrong thing. Like,
absolutely. Like, that's part of it. Like I've said many times that I feel like I don't like that there's a part of me that's vain, that there's vanity within me. But then it's like, but it is like, I can admit that, like, I like to do my hair. Look at us right now. I'm like, I got my lipstick on and I got my makeup on, I got my hair done. And even when I was getting ready, I was like, Allison, like, why do you do? And then I was like, because I enjoy it.
Well, it makes you feel good, right?
I enjoy it. Like, there's a part of me, like, I enjoy the act of putting the makeup on. I enjoy the artistic side, to be like, ooh, like, let me try this lippy. But does that make me, like, perception could be like that I'm superficial.
Yeah.
But that's perception, where I'm like, well, no, I know I have a lot of depth and groundedness to me, but I do enjoy, dressing up. Now, there's also another, like, a shadow side to that. There's this shadow side of like, ooh, but I'm also hypercritical of myself, that my insecurities would be shown if I was showing up with no makeup.
Right. So this always ties back to your self-worth, your self-love. And we both know, and I'm sure everybody that listens to the podcast knows
Allison is dealing with self-love. Okay.
A main lesson for Allie this lifetime is self-love and self-worth. And you've made so much progress in this, but still, life shows you these opportunities like all the time.
Oh my God, like too many. And I'm like, shut up.
You work on a layer and it's like, good job, Allison. And then here's another layer. Let's go a little deeper.
Yeah, shut up. I don't want to do this anymore. But, like, I think like some triggers, like personality traits, like, I think, like, for me, sometimes it's like what is it? Like, for me, sometimes, like, the person that's like, you can clearly see they're just like wanting attention. So, like, I think we've all had somebody on our Facebook that has been like, on their status and they're just like, oh man, ... and then
not
leaves
again,
it. Not again. And then I'm like, oh my God, just say it. Because now everybody's going, what's the matter? What's going on? Are you okay? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what the fuck? And that triggers me, because it's just like, what an attention seeking, part of it. So what is that? maybe there's a part of me that is attention seeking. I'm sure there is.
No,
Absolutely.
but not necessarily. Like, have you actually sat with this to figure it out?
Well,
Should we
and
do
I've
it?
and yeah, let's do it right
Let's
now,
do it
because
right
I've never
now.
done that on my Facebook where I've been like, meh, like everybody coming to ask me what's wrong.
Okay, so when somebody is attention seeking or seeking attention,
Mhm.
whether it's on Facebook or whether they're acting out or saying something, anyway,
Yeah.
where does that hit you on your body? Like, where do you feel that energy start to like ruminate?
Oh, I don't know.
Is it multiple?
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm like, I'm just trying to think of like a time when I've kind of come across it, but I'm like, where the fuck is it hitting me?
Does it make you want
It's
to go, bleh?
yeah. Well, yeah,
Makes you
like, well,
feel
I'm just kind
nauseous?
of, well, I guess I look at it and I'm like, this is so dumb. Like, it's just so dumb. And and there's like this part of me that's just kind of like, just be straightforward. And I get really triggered by like the games, like
Ah,
playing games, right? So
mm-hmm,
in my head, I'm like, dude, that's fine. I think it's fine to want to seek comfort,
mm-hmm,
and attention for something, especially when you're going through something shitty, right?
mm-hmm.
But let's skip over the games.
Right? Let's just be honest here.
Yeah, and then do it. But at the same breath, I'm just thinking, okay, so say somebody's like, and then everybody's like, oh, and then like hours later, it's like, oh, blah, blah, and then they say it, right? That pisses me off. But then at the same time, too, I guess there's a part of me that's like, if you went on to social media and literally splayed your whole story, I guess for me, I keep those things.
To yourself.
Yeah, that's not a social. Like I will tell everybody in person because I'm a very open book,
or on the podcast.
On the podcast, like, so it's not that I'm a secretive person or I keep shit to myself, because I definitely don't. Like, I'm too open. But I guess in the sense of the social media, there's that part that of me just putting it on my personal and being like airing it out. It would take a lot for me to do it. And I guess in my head, it would be, there needs to be a purpose to it. So when I shared at one point about my Lyme disease, I wasn't sharing during my struggles. I shared well after I was over it, more with the purpose of, in my head, I was like, if I can help somebody else, then that's what I want to do. But it wasn't this like, I'm going to start putting this out to seek sympathy in that sense.
Yeah. So people seeking attention triggers you.
Mm-hmm.
We still don't know why.
Yeah. You tell me, Dr. Mandy.
Well, clearly it obviously has something to do with your self-worth, because that's all what it ties
when it always comes down to. Gosh dang
Easy.
it. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, I know. I don't know what it is.
Well, you need to reflect on that, because clearly it's one that will probably have a little bit of time where you need to like, oh, I don't know. And then you're going to sit there. I can feel it ruminating in your brain already.
Yeah, I know it is. And it's probably something I don't want to admit to.
Maybe. So we'll stay tuned. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to say, like, there was a trigger that happened. Well, first of all, we'll talk about it. Okay. We were talking about before.
Yeah.
Okay. So Allie and I were talking about the fires in LA, and, obviously we feel so much grief and like terrible situation as to what's happening with those fires. And it's just,
devastating.
And our friend Asha, that was the astrologer, she lives in LA, so she's dealing with it. She had to evacuate. Like, shout out to Asha. Like, we hope everything is okay and all that sort of stuff. But I think regardless of how much empathy I feel towards everybody that's lost their whole, like, you have your home is your vibe. It's your safe space. And for it to be just gone in a second, like, there is this grief and this loss and this trauma that everybody's going through. But then
it's scary, right? Like the displacement and, not even living there and seeing images of the before and after, you can easily bring that to like envision it where you are. And so even if you're safe and everything, I think there's this like trauma piece of being like, holy fuck.
Well, it's
like
literally
just gone.
yeah, it's literally the tower moment, or the rug being
Yeah.
pulled out from underneath you. Like your stability, your safe zone, your
Yeah.
root chakra, your foundation
Gone.
has crumbled. So
Yeah.
now you're starting fresh with everything. And where do you do that when the whole freaking city's gone? Like, it's not like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So there is that whole aspect to that part of it that I have so much compassion for and so much empathy for. But what's triggered me, and it's hard to admit this, and but obviously this happened in LA, so there's a lot of celebrities
And
and a
it's
lot
triggered
of
a lot of people.
okay, so good, I'm
Yeah.
not the only one.
No, 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 no. You can see from comments and stuff, like there's a lot of people that have been triggered by.
Then okay, so
Yeah.
they're people of wealth, people of stature, people of that have a platform, like there's people complaining about losing their materialistic stuff. So one person, I'm Paris Hilton, for example, very vocal about specifically saying, I lost my Malibu beachfront home. You know what I
Mm-hmm,
mean?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Another
mm-hmm.
person that I follow, oh my gosh, my $20,000 vintage couch. I'm so sad. Like specifically
Yeah.
like pointing out the value or the materialistic part of it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I felt really guilty. Like, why do I feel triggered about it when people are pointing out, like verbally sharing the
Mm-hmm.
value of the things that they lost? And, that's what they're focusing on. And I,
Yeah. Well, that kind of feels icky.
yeah,
The value of it.
like I have empathy and compassion that you lost your home and your foundation. And like, I understand the grief.
Memories.
Yeah. But I don't think that maybe they understand that's what they're feeling, and that's how they're expressing it, is like, I lost my $1 million wardrobe or whatever it is, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's how they're expressing it, and that's fine. That's that doesn't really bother me, but I triggered something in that frequency triggers me. So I was like, why does that trigger me? Because it bothers me that it triggers me. So
Mm.
you and I were talking about it beforehand, and I was like, let's figure this out. So really, I think what we realize is what triggers me is that it is highlighting an injustice in the world, right? That there is all of this wealth and status in this one area, and there's so many people that have gone through similar situations that don't have
Means.
the means to rebuild or to help others, or and when their foundation and their things are gone, if they're gone,
Yeah.
and they're not crying about it on social media. I mean, maybe they are, but like it's just a different energy. So really what it's doing is it's highlighting the injustice that this has happened to so many people across the world. And then we have these very wealthy people highlighting the value of the things that they lost, not trying to take away that they lost and that there's this grief and there's trauma that they've experienced. But I think what it's highlighting for me, what the trigger is that so many of us turn a blind eye to the poverty and to those situations where like the other half of the world live, because we feel so overwhelmed that we can't do anything to help, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so now that it's being highlighted, it's highlighting my guilt that I can't do anything, or I feel like I can't do anything, therefore I don't do anything to help the other half of the world where they're struggling, right?
Yeah. Well, and even just parts of the world that are in war
Mm-hmm.
zones. That has been brought up. I've seen on chats where people are kind of like, there's this lack of empathy, being
Mm-hmm.
like, cool, that's what my hometown looks like all the time because it's having
Mm-hmm.
bombs, and so I'm definitely somebody that, we comparing like somebody's hurt or pain compared to somebody else, like, so there's kind of like two sides to it. So it's one to be like, okay, let's have a perspective shift,
Mm-hmm.
right, and find the gratitude in what we do have and all of that. But at the other end of it too, there's you allowing people to process their grief. So let's just say, for instance, like somebody was diagnosed with cancer versus somebody was diagnosed with a mental illness. Somebody might be like, oh yeah, the one with cancer has like more,
That's way more
justification of
devastating.
being like than this, or and then say you're like, yeah, I know you're right, like I should be grateful that I don't have that. No, you should feel what you're going to feel,
Mm-hmm.
because it does suck, but also there's then the perspective of like, but yes, I also am grateful that
Mm-hmm.
maybe I don't have this and this and this, but still not avoiding feeling how you feel. Um, and so I think, like, with this, the triggering of where this all happened was within a very rich part of
The world.
the world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in that sense, there's this injustice, or the justice side of you gets triggered, and even within me,
Mm-hmm.
where it just feels icky
Mm-hmm.
when you see somebody that probably has a lot more money than you and
Mm-hmm.
me and majority of people in the world, um, and maybe have multiple houses, and live this luxury lifestyle that is very a rarity.
Yeah.
It's not a common.
Indulgent.
It's very indulgent, very, where it's like, okay, like, yeah, that fucking sucks, like, to lose anything like that sucks, but thank God you have like 3 other homes that you can go to, right? And so I do think, in that sense of like, maybe the broadcasting of it is a
Yeah.
little tone deaf, in that sense. One person's getting a lot of heat, Mandy Moore, for
Mm.
posting, or sharing her sister's GoFundMe, because her sister lost her house, and people are up in arms. How dare she, ask for money, and all these things. And in my head, I was like, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah.
It's not her responsibility.
Yeah.
So yes, she's got money. we
Mm-hmm.
we have no idea how much she's given over, because
Mm-hmm.
obviously she's given over some, and she has come out and done a statement, but is like pissed off that she has to do that. and
Yeah.
and in my head, I'm like, okay, come on, guys, like, it's not her responsibility to give it. Obviously she's giving it out of her kind heart, but she's then sharing
Mm-hmm.
that her sister, who doesn't have the means, is, but then people are like, that's fucking bullshit, why are you paying for it? And it's like, come on,
Well,
let's be
yeah.
serious about this.
That's
Like,
not really fair.
that's not fair.
No.
And so, like, there's kind of this
There's this duality that's happening.
there is a duality, and
Mm-hmm.
I think, like, where I struggle, like, especially when I see somebody that's come on camera, whether it's this situation or anything else, everybody can say they've seen a camera or like a post where somebody's filming themselves crying.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen spoofs of this where all of a sudden you see like somebody that is setting up their camera, and
Oh
they're like,
yeah.
and then they start it, and then they're like, oh, like that kind of spoof of it. And so I think that's sometimes a bit of like, people are triggered by the authenticity
That's
of
a
what they're
great
seeing.
perspective because I feel like, yeah, the authenticity is lacking in some, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that maybe that's part of the trigger, right? But yeah, I don't know
And
this
that way you're kind of like taking away from the real, maybe, victim. So
trauma. Yeah.
even though you're a victim of your house, like, absolutely nobody's taking that away. But then again, being grateful and understanding your privilege.
Mm-hmm.
You have this platform, or this privilege of,
Mm-hmm.
having extra income. So I think, like, what would go a long way is if somebody was like, oh my God, like, if you had a celebrity come on and they were like, oh my God, like, yeah, I lost everything. I'm mostly sad about the memories, like my kids' pictures and stuff like that. But I also have neighbors that have lost, and being like, I feel so grateful that I have the means
Mm-hmm.
to do this. So I'm going to come and help
Mm-hmm.
the people of the community that don't have the means. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
a big difference
What?
compared to somebody that's like, oh my God, I've lost my, $20,000 couch, and this is just devastating. Like, yeah, people are going to be triggered because that's
Yeah.
just kind of gross. Like,
They're
there's,
highlighting their privilege those statements. They're highlighting their
yeah.
privilege.
And you're not
And
being of service. You're being, it to me, like, that's very like self-centered.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's highlighting a lot for people. Obviously the fight, there's so much to with the fires. Like there's the I hesitate to say conspiracies because
I
they
know.
really aren't really conspiracies. They are truths. There's
Yeah.
stories about, about the purpose of the fires because
Yeah.
nothing like that happens naturally. Give me a
Well,
break.
like I was like, wow, perfect storm, the wind picking up like it did. And
Yeah.
um it yeah, like
It's just
we
highlighting a
definitely,
lot.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and we feel it. Like we're not going to go into all of that because again, like this is where it's like you can like getting yourself out of this like trigger. So obviously we see it everywhere and
Mm-hmm.
it's part of it. And it's not ignoring. It's like we can do our part to help, different people um and to help different situations, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's also being able to come into your middle space and not get kind of dragged into maybe the full conspiracy. Like I know I can
Yeah.
get like pulled down and be like, this is bullshit, and like the injustice and all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then but also kind of be like, okay, yeah, it is what it is. Now what do we do?
Yeah. So
How do
being
we
the
move forward?
being in the role of the observer, right?
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
observing all of the duality of that's going on that this is creating, but also observing when things are triggering you and trying to figure out why
Yeah.
that triggers you. So, I
And why
felt
is that a gift? Like I was just thinking
yeah.
of that when we're like, why is it a gift to be triggered? Like I kind of look at it. It is a gift.
I was like, I don't know. It doesn't feel like a really good. It feel like it's an opportunity. I don't know
Well,
about a
it's
gift.
like, but it's like it is this opportunity, it's this gift, and so it's like don't waste it
That's true.
in that sense because that trigger is the easy way. This is how spirit. So you know how many times like we'll
Mm-hmm.
be with clients and we'll be like, okay, there's some healing here, blah blah blah. And they're like, well, how do I do it? How do I access it?
Your
And it's like,
triggers.
yeah, it's your triggers, and then it's like, okay, you don't have to worry about the
Mm-hmm.
how. Spirit will bring that to your attention. You just have to be aware of when it comes. And you don't have to fix all of it all at once. So, say there's like,
Mm-hmm.
some people would be a reading and it'd be like, some things that kind of, and they're like, yeah, yeah. I can sit here and be like, here's my laundry list of things I need to work through. Is it something that you're like, oh, you need to work on all of them all at once? No, but it's being open to when these triggers, spirit will bring it to your attention, give you the opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to heal it when the time is right. And so that's where I kind of like look at it as like, even though the triggers don't feel great, don't waste them. Like,
Yeah.
because that is that time to truly kind of dig deeper. And in a way, it's kind of the easy card. Instead of
Yeah.
you sitting there being like, okay, what's really bothering, and you trying to go down all these avenues, just when you get triggered, start there. And
Yeah.
that's all you
And
have to worry about.
yeah, you'll notice like so if somebody's kind of at the beginning of their journey, their healing journey, um, you'll note like if you're getting triggered all the time, you'll probably notice a theme.
Yeah.
If you start reflecting
Yeah.
on each time you're being triggered, you'll probably notice a theme as to what it's tying to. And then you'll be like, oh, the overall healing I'm doing here is self-worth or lack or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll notice a theme with all the triggers that are coming forward, and you'll be like, okay, this is so. How do I move forward from that?
Mm-hmm.
And then spirit will bring you opportunities to
Ample.
ample opportunities to work through that, right? But this is where you tie in like meditation and shadow work and, you know, all the healings, like people, you can do breath work, you can do sound bowl healings, you can do yoga, like just,
Yeah.
reflection, meditation, like all that sort of stuff is where you start.
And
So,
acknowledgement, we always kind of say like having like acknowledging it, seeing it,
mm-hmm,
like that is the first damn step, because if
yeah,
we're blind to it, you're healing nothing. So when you're able to recognize it and acknowledge it, first step, because now you're
mm-hmm,
going to recognize it and acknowledge it every time in
yeah,
different scenarios,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And be able to just kind of be like, okay, like I have, like I remember one was like dropping my kids off at their dad's house, and I don't know, something he said something, and it triggered me, like not in the sense of like, because trigger's not always anger,
no, it's like a
right?
ping
A
or
ping, or something that makes you feel sad, or something that makes you feel ooh. And so I remember driving away and being like, ooh, why do I feel yuck?
mm-hmm.
And because just that feeling of like, I don't feel good. Um, with that exchange. And then so I remember driving away and I was like, okay, why did that make me feel yuck. And it had to do where I was like, oh, okay, it's about my self-worth. I think it was probably to do something with him dating or something.
Mm-hmm.
And logically I could sit there and be like, yeah, well, you guys are separated. That's gonna happen. But I also can't take away how my body felt, you know,
No.
in that sense. And so I kind of sat with that and just started to kind of be like, okay, so that triggered, I called it out. That triggered me because he's interested in somebody else and no longer interested in me. Okay, so why is that triggering me? Oh, okay, wow. Okay, that has to do with like, oh my God, I'm not desired anymore. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not the main person anymore. So logically, I can say, well, duh, Allison, like, of course he's gonna like have,
Yeah.
but that doesn't take it away. So then I'm like, okay, what does this fall back into? And it really like when you start to kind of go deeper and deeper and deeper, it really comes to that core wound of not feeling enough or feeling like you're or connecting your self-worth to somebody else instead of having your own love for yourself, that it doesn't matter
Yeah.
if somebody loves you or not anymore, you know, in that sense.
And
So
that's
that's how you
where,
kind of work through it.
yeah. And that's where most people miss the mark because they might recognize that that made them feel ick, but then carry on with their day and not think about it again, and then just continue to feel the ick, but not really try to understand why they feel icky, right?
Yeah.
So that's when people say doing the work, that's what they
Yeah.
mean.
It's
That's
pulling
doing the
back
work.
those layers, right? It was pulling back those layers to get to it. And then once I kind of got to it, in a way, I kind of just started to talk to myself. And I'm like, you're okay.
Mm-hmm.
You're okay. Like you are. And that's when I started to pour self love into myself because I recognized where that core was to be like,
Mm-hmm.
no, you have a beautiful soul. You have a great personality. This scenario does not take away any of those things
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
And so that's then you really then are trying to kind of counteract that subconscious
Mm-hmm.
um, layer to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did we go over everything we wanted to go over? I just want to make sure because I'm like, I feel like sometimes we can like go off on tangents, but it like just the importance of like taking that, like really like taking that opportunity to work with it and not just
Yeah.
kind of bypass over that trigger.
Yeah. We talked about the opportunity triggers present
Yeah.
for healing, obviously. Obviously, we talked about that perspective of triggers. We and then do we talk about like
Mm.
different perspectives of the triggers? I think we, let's just talk about it now. But we did kind of touch on it, like when it's not aces to aces, like the
Yeah.
mirror, the reflection, it's more of a reflection, more of a highlight, but also kind of looking at that trigger or that opportunity to reflect from different perspectives. And again, not or being able to look at it from the perspective of this has nothing to do with the person that triggered me. This has everything to do with me. So when you start projecting your trigger back to that person is when you're taking full responsibility. Because so many times when we get triggered, it lots of times it is causes anger, and there's usually a reaction that goes along with that. And so again, bringing this back to when I started doing this work and my kids were triggering me, I would have a reaction, and it was usually within anger, right?
Yeah.
So at the beginning, I would still have the reaction, and then I would reflect on it and be like, okay, I reacted this way. I gave myself compassion and forgiveness and permission to have that reaction. But over time, and it didn't take long, over time, I stopped reacting
Yeah.
immediately, and I was able to sit with the situation before I decided how I wanted to react.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So just being able to look at things from a different perspective is very, very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's, you know, being in that person's shoes too. And sometimes understanding the why to maybe the why they do that, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
the narcissist, like sometimes what helps me is being like, okay, well, let's pull this back to their childhood.
Yeah.
Most kids don't come out a raging narcissist. So when you can kind of pull that back to the childhood and have empathy for that child that
Mm-hmm.
was in an environment that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, kind of created or that survival mechanism kind of took over, like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that will really help me to have that perspective to be like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
because we can't change, we can't, like, that's that person's journey.
Mhm.
If there's somebody at work that is just like a know-it-all, or like it's just kind of like, oh, I know that already.
It's so annoying,
And you're
but
like, why are you asking me for help if you know that already? uh, like, so fucking hard, like a know-it-all and stuff. And like, for me, that could trigger me because I feel like I do the opposite. I
yeah.
will make myself, even if I know it, I'll be like, oh, is that how you do it? Okay. So does that really a good way to do it? No, because I'm like, oh yeah, I'm so dumb. Because I don't want to make them feel bad. But it's like, it's one of those where you're kind of like, okay, like, even that perspective of like, okay, maybe that person has really suffers from their own
Self-worth.
confidence,
Yeah.
and this is just their
You're
kind of
just
like shield, their way of dealing with it.
Mhm.
And that it's kind of like, do I need to carry that?
Well,
Like, that's for them to work through.
that's the thing is most people walk around in the unhealed version of themselves.
Yeah.
Right. So when we look at that perspective and the people that we deal with throughout our day, we're dealing with their inner child. We're dealing with
Mm-hmm.
the unhealed version of themselves for the most part. It's rare that you come across a very aligned and conscious person who is doing the healing work for themselves. But when you do, let me tell you, it's fucking amazing because there's
Mm-hmm.
like this whole other level of respect and
Mm-hmm.
connection that you can get into that's just amazing.
Oh
But
yeah.
for the most part, our whole day is dealt with people who are unhealed versions of themselves. So having
Yeah. The
being able,
Karens, like we
yeah,
like to dub anybody that like speaks up and is like, blah, 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 and you're like, you're a Karen. And then it's just like, okay, but maybe Karens aren't that, like, there's a part. Okay. There's like the Karen where you're like a dick.
yeah.
And you're like, okay,
But
I feel
they're
sorry for her because she's miserable. But
having
then there's, yeah,
yeah.
but then there's also the Karen that I can see where it's like you're respectful, but you are standing up for what you believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And as a collective, we kind of lack that,
Yeah.
that authenticity and standing up for ourselves and being like, no, actually, no, that is wrong, and saying it like,
Mm-hmm.
bravo for
Mm-hmm.
doing that. Right.
Yeah. And I think there's many ways that you can do that when you're trying to take a stand and stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
There's and it's all about the energy that you hold when you're taking your stand. Like, are you holding that
Boom.
energy in anger and volatility, and or are you holding that energy and you're sharing your authenticity with confidence and with,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I want to say juncture, but like I stand in my
Mm.
knowing, like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So there's different ways that you can stand up for yourself, and what is the
Yeah.
energy that you're holding when you do that. So there's different ways that you can do that. And I feel like yeah, yeah. But again,
And
look,
you're going to trigger people even in
mm-hmm,
that. Like,
yeah,
I even just like a triggering of like vibration. I know that my light and my vibration has triggered and will continue to trigger
mm-hmm,
maybe somebody that's in a lower vibration, right? Because I'm highlighting
mm-hmm,
versions, I'm triggering them so
yeah,
much
yeah.
because, in that sense that I'm like, and you just have to be okay with that.
That's a great way to bring to bring the conversation there, because we talk so much about receiving the triggers, but we haven't talked about the one being the trigger, right?
Yeah.
And as
Yeah.
people who are on this path and that are compassionate for the most part, empathic, really trying to do the work, very aware of their own self, being the one to trigger people can make us want
It's
to
hard.
retract. It makes
Yeah.
you want to retract. And you're right. Like, in a sense, you do feel like you need to dim your light to make other people more comfortable. But I
Mm-hmm.
remember, when you and I were, because you were triggering me too. I was triggering you. Like, it was a back and
Mm-hmm.
forth
Yeah.
opportunities for us to do some healing work, and it was like an exponential time of healing for both of us. Like,
I know.
it was like this short period where it was like boom, heal,
Oh
and
my
it was like,
God.
but we took on that challenge and we did a lot of work on ourselves individually, but also
Mm-hmm.
understanding and holding compassion for each other
Mm-hmm.
as we were doing the work, right? But it just
Mm-hmm.
so happened that we were doing the triggering for each
For
other.
each other, it was like, whoop, whoop, whoop,
Yeah,
whoop.
it was like a ping pong game.
I know. Fuck us, man.
But it's hard when you but I remember feeling at the beginning, it was like, oh my God, I pissed Allison off. I said the wrong thing and oh, like I feel so shitty. And I was like, oh my God, what did I do now? What did I say? Like it was like constantly me feeling really bad about triggering you or highlighting your, but then there was this moment where it was like, I can't no,
Mm-hmm.
like I can't control how you received.
Mm-hmm.
So I acknowledge that I triggered you, and I can reflect on different ways that I could have done something differently or whatever the
But you
situation
don't need to
was.
carry
I
it.
don't need to carry it. I don't need to hold
Mm-mm.
your pain. I don't, and
Mm-mm.
that's not my responsibility to do that because
No.
it's your journey, it's your healing. If I
Yeah.
take that, like I wasn't transmuting it, I was carrying it and I was holding it. I
Yeah.
was feeling guilty. I was feeling icky. I was feeling sad. I was all these emotions, but that was a lesson for me,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
A
Well,
healing for me.
yeah, the back and forth, right?
Yeah.
Like understanding that you don't need to carry it. Yes, there's the perspective of like, okay, I didn't realize this. Like, how can I, but without diving,
Mm-hmm.
it's a balance
It's hard.
with that. And I know like with you, there was, like if I pointed out something that, like, say a graphic was wrong or a word is wrong or something, that you
Wrong.
had this wrong.
Wrong.
No. I'm like, Mandy has a real gets triggered by the word no.
It holds up
I
vibration.
know it holds a vibration, but I remember kind of going through, like, we worked through that where I was like, okay, that would trigger you if I pointed out, and then I would get like, oh my God, like, should I say something? I'm not sure because she's gonna get mad. Like, I don't know. So then I would like tiptoe, but then I was like, this is where the communication comes. This is
Yeah.
where, because we were both very open and aware of the outside of ourselves, we
Mm-hmm.
could have these conversations. And it
Yeah.
came down to where it was like, okay, would you rather me not say anything and have a client say it? Or
Mm-hmm.
would you rather me say it? Well, no, I want you to say it. Okay. So how can I approach this so that you're not being triggered? But then on your side, you had to face it and be like, okay, wait a minute.
Why is it triggering me?
Yeah, there's like the little girl in me that
Mm-hmm.
wanted to impress or didn't, always
Please.
please, all of that. And when you say this, it highlights this for me. So
Mm-hmm.
now where do I work on this
Yeah.
so that I can get constructive criticism and not kind of like take it as a
Insults
insult
or
and a hit, and
mm-hmm.
then me, I was like, okay, well, I understand that this is your thing. So I am compassionate enough to be like, okay, I will say it in this way. So yes, was I maneuvering myself to fit within yourself? Yes, but I also wasn't taking away, like, a part of me to be like, okay, it's okay. Yeah, just send it out like that. It's fine. Yeah, it's fine. But I was able to present it in a way that kind of like would help you
Mm-hmm.
receive it better. So, like, all of those parts of it, when you're triggering other people like that, the people pleaser in me,
Mm-hmm.
um, that's a big fucking struggle. But throughout my life, I've had different opportunities of maybe, I would say it's like male, but kind of very maybe egotistical. And I've had issues where they haven't liked me or something. And
Right.
then I'm like, well, who's the common denominator? It's me. So I'm
Right.
the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then it wasn't until we kind of got into this work, because then I'd be like, what am I doing? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I'm not a bitchy person. Like, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
like, whatever. And so I remember like getting to this work and realizing like, holy fuck, it's not me
Yeah.
per se. It is me, but it's not that I'm doing something. It's just my energy, my frequency fucking highlights something
Mm-hmm.
within them, or that brightness or whatever it is. And where they're just like, holy fuck, get
Yeah.
away. I think we've always had like seen that person that's super happy all the time. Like, I know I can piss people off with my jolliness.
With my enthusiasm, my
I
jest for life.
my just for life, where I'm like, God, it's so fun. And then you're just like,
Shut up. Just
shut up. I'm not happy in my life right now. And you being happy is so fucking annoying.
Well, there's this one mom in my life that I have had to, cross paths with so many times because of sports.
Yeah.
And this person, I'm trying not to say, like, I don't want to give away who this person is,
Yeah.
but she just doesn't like me, and I don't know why. I mean, sorry, I do know why, but she can be dismissive and short and rude, and but then sometimes she's very friendly, and so it's just really confusing to me. And but through all these years, we've never been able to connect and to, like, it's been
come
like
on a common ground.
Yeah, like I don't know what I mean, I don't, for a long time, I didn't know what the deal was. And I was like, the people pleaser in me, and the person that's like, why everybody, like, there's no reason for you not to like me. I'm a nice person.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is I trigger her just by being myself. And I can't
and
help
we're going to have that. And we're going to have that. Yeah. We're going to have that. Everybody has that. Every single person. Not everybody's going to like you, and not everybody's meant to like you. And I think the more we can kind of come to terms with that, the more at peace we can be as an individual. And just let it go, and it is what it is. Like, that's so fucking easy to say, because at the same time, you don't like me, I'm gonna double down and be harder for you to like me. I'm kidding. I'm kidding, but not kidding. Okay,
right. Okay. I'm kidding, but I'm not kidding. Well, there's
kidding, but not kidding.
I just have let it go, and when she feels like in a good mood and she can talk to me, then I will be open to it. But if not,
you're not
then
going to take it as
we'll
an
just
insult.
we'll just avoid that we're standing beside each other and not say a word. Like, that's totally normal.
Yeah. And that's, again, you're solid within yourself. Then you're good. We're good.
It's just my natural, to be friendly to everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it can feel weird. I know. All right. Well, let's wrap this up.
No. Just kidding.
No, God. Oh.
I hope we didn't trigger you with our conversation today. Just kidding. If we triggered you, good.
Good. Take this opportunity and this blessing and this gift.
Don't waste it.
Don't waste this opportunity.
So funny.
All right. Well, we hope you guys have a fantastic week, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.